Say you make a mistake. What does your inner voice tell you? Does it berate you or does it support you? Inner coach versus inner critic. Which voice is the loudest in your mind? Be honest. And what is the difference? To tell us all about the difference between the two and how to turn the volume up on that inner coach, Dr. Jo Lukens joins you now. Good morning, Jo.
Good morning, Miranda.
Before we get into the inner coach, inner critic, Sunshine Coast is your stomping ground, isn't it?
It is my stomping ground from many years ago. So I went to primary school and to high school here on the coast and have family here. My parents are still here, so I love coming back to the coast whenever I get a chance. So it was quite opportune that we were talking this morning and I was able to pop in.
It's lovely to have you here. Okay. What exactly is the inner critic?
Yeah, so as you said, that there is an inner dialogue that we all have. So if we've ever noticed that voice inside our heads, the good news is that it's supposed to be there. The challenge for us is that the way that we choose to speak to ourselves has a huge impact on us in terms of how we feel and what we do. So what I've often described to people, and in the space that I work, which is often in the sports scenarios, is the idea that sometimes we can speak to ourselves in a way that's helpful and from that coaching perspective, like a coach might speak to us, and other times we can be quite critical. And the challenge with that is that often that leaves us feeling anxious and worried, and it typically doesn't lean us and get us closer to higher performance. So being aware of whether we use the inner critic or the inner coach is a really helpful thing for us to consider at times.
How would you describe the inner coach? What's the sorts of language around the inner coach?
Yeah, so the inner coach is like a coach on a sporting team, hopefully, in that there's that support and there's that guidance. There's an understanding that a mistake can come along and it's not so much what happens to us but what we do about it next. There's a lesson to be learnt. So the inner coach is much more gentle, is kinder, can be very tough as well. So it's not about avoiding those particular points, but we know that the inner coach and that type of dialogue when we're assessing ourselves is much more helpful and it gets us much closer to better performances, whatever it is that we do in life.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about that, Jo, because what kind of difference can it make if we're encouraging that inner coach dialogue?
Yes, so if I turn it around, what tends to happen is when we are critical to ourselves, it ends up with us feeling anxious and feeling worried. We get stuck where we are and it doesn't usually give us many strategies to move forward. But the inner coach is the one that can say, okay, so that didn't go to plan, and often in life things don't go to plan, and whether it be on the sporting field or making a souffle at home or whatever it might be, it doesn't matter what we're doing, is that sometimes things don't go to plan, but it's what we do next that becomes really critical. And so the nice thing with the inner coach is the inner coach can help us to get there. We can speak to ourselves in a way that is helpful, that is honest, that is reflective, and then that is going to do a much better job of having us feel better, and then we're going to get closer to those better performances that we're seeking.
You mentioned that inner dialogue, everyone has it, but why are we so conditioned to only or to listen more to that inner critic?
Yes, because it's easier. Just quite simply, because we know that thinking negatively, seeking out the things that are going to go wrong, it's a default position as humans. We're inherently looking for that because I guess in some ways it has protected us over time. If we work off the assumption as to what could go wrong here, those are some of the thoughts that maybe help us to make good choices in terms of survival, for example. So that tendency to seek out what could go wrong, what will be bad, has its place. But what we tend to do is it's also much easier to get on what I call sometimes the complain train, the idea of not being happy, of whinging, of all of those sorts of things. And when we put ourselves in achievement-related settings, so whether we are a student who's at school, whether we are in the workplace and we're trying to do well at our job, whether we're an athlete on the field or whether we're taking on a project at home, all of those things benefit from seeking out the good, looking to what will go well, being enthusiastic about things. And so then when it does not go to plan, then we're better equipped then to manage those disappointments, move on and then get closer to success.
You're with ABC Radio Queensland. It's 17 minutes away from 11 o'clock and Dr. Jo Lukens joins you. She's talking about the inner critic versus the inner coach. Now, in elite sport or leadership, how can the awareness of the differences between that critic v coach, What difference can that make?
Oh, a huge difference. I guess that's where I've spent most of my career, is sitting in that space with athletes and coaches and teams. And what we repeatedly see from the research is that when we are more optimistic, when we are more hopeful, when we look at things through the lens of that coaching lens, if you like, we set ourselves up for success. So many years ago, my PhD research actually explored some of these things. And when you looked at athletes in terms of injury, and if you had two athletes with similar injury, one athlete takes more of a critical approach to the injury, one takes more of a coaching role, if we want to use that terminology, the athlete with a coaching perspective who was more optimistic and hopeful would actually get back to their sport quicker. So we know that it benefits in a whole range of different ways. And certainly when we look at the way individual athletes and teams explain the world, when we say we won, why did that happen? We lost, why did that happen? When we look at it through that lens, we find that those athletes who are more optimistic will generally set themselves up significantly more for success rather than those who are more pessimistic.
Are people born optimists or pessimists, and can you change?
I don't believe that you are. I think that the way you explain the world, our psychology jargon term for that is the explanatory style, is something that we create and we develop. So as we encourage our children as they're growing up, the language that we use, the reasons we explain the world, our children are sponges and they very much pick that up. So that aside though, and if you look at it, when we were one, we learned how to walk. Yep. So for any of us that have learned how to do that, that means you have learnt to do a skill after repeatedly failing at it. So each time we fall down, what we did was we got back up, or we learnt to ride a bike, or we learnt to write cursive, or whatever the thing was. So it's a test of perseverance and resilience when we do any of those life skills. So the good news is that if anyone's listening and going, oh, maybe I am more critical to myself than I could be, or maybe I could adopt this inner coach thing, is it too late? The good news is no. So we know that developing our skills, this is a constant work in progress for most of us, and it doesn't mean that those who, like even for me with having a background in all of this, I am critical on myself many times. But the inner critic speaks louder than the inner coach, but that's okay. We just notice it and we find ways to move on.
Okay, just on that, let's say practically, we're in a social situation, we've said the wrong thing. Instantly we go, oh, you're silly. Why did you say that? What do we do in that moment, Jo?
So the first thing that we do is exactly what you've just said, is we notice it, notice the situation, and then we notice the dialogue and go, well, that was an interesting way for me to manage that. And yes, that was unfortunate. These things happen, and I'm pretty sure as I gaze out the window, the sun will still come up tomorrow, and all of those things that we might do. We are prone, all of us, to having those things that can raise the volume on the critic. We notice it, we forgive ourselves, we pause, we take a breath, we can do any of those sorts of things and then think about what can I learn from this, how can I manage this differently next time. And that's probably, there will always be a lesson. Life is full of lessons, isn't it, Miranda?
I love that. Yeah. I love that. Every single day, and sometimes many.
Multiple, yes.
Multiple
the lessons you don't want to learn, but you learn them anyway.
And over again. All right, what's the takeaway for our listeners? What do you need them to just hear today?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that is really useful is just to pay attention to the voice inside your head. Don't get too stuck in your own head, but just notice that the next time something goes pear-shaped and doesn't quite go according to plan, how do you choose to speak to yourself? Are you being overly critical? Are you coaching yourself? Is there a way that you can maybe be kinder to yourself in the words that you use? So maybe pick an area of your life or something that you're doing and pay a little bit more attention to the way that you choose to speak to yourself.
I love it. And a little bit more kindness.
A little bit more kindness never goes astray.
Dr. Jo Lukens, thank you so much for joining us today. The inner critic versus the inner coach. I know which one is often louder in my head, so it's lovely to get those practical tools. You're with ABC Radio Queensland.